Hello, everyone. This is Dan Liebenson, and I am here with B'nai Lappi for this week's episode of the Oral Talmud. Hey, B'nai.
Hey Dan, how are you?
All right. Sorry we're a couple of minutes late. We had a little bit of a technical challenge getting this streaming, but here we are. But we did it. So,
Yay.
yay. So B'nai, we're in the middle of a text that we've been doing for a couple of weeks now. We're about to finish it and then go on to another text that follows on similar ideas. And it's actually part of this long part that we're doing, where we're really looking at this pretty dramatic thing that happens in the Talmud, where the rabbis are overturning various laws that of the Torah, and they're doing it for reasons that are given in different places, different, but ultimately what we're working with this hypothesis that it involves they're elevating the principle of the alleviation of human suffering to a higher level than it was in the Torah. And
Yeah,
fundamentally, that's what's going on.
that's right. And they're showing their hand. I think what's really important is not just that they're doing it, but they're showing you that they're doing that. And by that, I mean overturning Torah with what their own sense, their own svara tells them is a better take on how to be a human being and a better guess at what we think God wants of us. They're letting us know that they're doing that, and they're showing us how to do it. They're showing, at the very least, they're showing us how they did it. My leap is to say they're showing us how they did it so that we can know how to do it. And that's why I think this entire document of the Talmud is an instruction manual for us. I think they meant to teach us how to do it so that we could do it.
Yeah. So let's just do a little bit of a little bit of a reminding. So we're in this text that basically the issue is that there's a certain principle in the Torah we've gone into in the last couple of weeks. We don't really have to dwell on it right now, but there's a principle in the Torah that basically says that in a particular case, a divorce would be not effective, meaning that there's a husband and a wife, they're still married according to the Torah, but for a certain reason, but the husband is basically waylaid. They don't know if he's coming back or not. Like technically, they may well be still married according to the Torah, and the rabbis here are saying, or the Talmud here is saying, Rava is saying that that we're going to put that divorce into force, meaning we're going to say that that divorce is in force, even though according to the Torah, it might not be in force.
And I would elevate that even further. It's not only might not, the incredulous voice of the editor is saying, but those cases where for sure he comes back and says, hey, but it wasn't my fault, that divorce should be annulled because the Torah says it's annulled and we're still married. That's the case that the Talmud is identifying as so outrageous, because that's precisely the case where the rabbis are without apology saying, yeah, we're going to ignore how the Torah would view this situation. Yeah, in the eyes of the Torah, this marriage that first marriage is a marriage again, retroactively, and the second marriage is adulterous. And the rabbis are saying, no, we're going to ignore what the Torah thinks.
And this isn't just like a little something. By the way, neither was the earlier weeks when we talked about the various breaking of Shabbat. I mean, these are the 10 commandments. One is Shabbat, one is do not commit adultery, and so the rabbis here are saying that the fact is that according to the Torah, if they really are married, and she got, quote, married to another man, then actually she's not married to the second man. They're committing adultery. That's a violation of one of the 10 commandments. That's really bad. And their kids are going to be mamzerim, which is a category of people, we could roughly translate it as bastards, who are in this second class at best. I mean, third, fourth class of citizens, basically, where they're only allowed to marry each other. And it's just a bad thing. You don't want your children to be mamzerim. And so this is, according to the Torah, this is a very bad situation.
And let's remember, those children who are mamzerim are only able to have children who will inherit that status forevermore, for all eternity. Their children will be mamzerim, their children's children forever. They can never be released from that restrictive 10th class status. Yeah. So it's right. It's really bad.
And I mean, like, I guess we'll get into this in a second, whether what the logic here exactly is, but if they are mamzerim according to the Torah, like it gets to this question of like, what does it mean to have this kind of a status, whether it's impurity or mamzerity or whatever it might be according to the Torah? Because in principle, they're almost like declaring a truth. It's almost like if you have two people with light-colored eyes, we know those are both double recessive. Their children are going to have light-colored eyes. Like, this is not an opinion. This is a truth. This is a fact.
That's
so
right.
So if you're a mamzer, and then you're passing your mamzerity down to the next person. Now, if somebody comes along and says, well, we're going to say that you're not a mamzer according to the, but you still are a mamzer according to the Torah. So there's this like bad thing being passed down. We're just choosing to ignore it. I mean, that's one possibility, right? What that's starting to say is that the world we're creating is so divergent from the world of the Torah that we're full of mamzers, according to the Torah in the world, and we're just going to, not see that status, except that they're about to say something slightly different.
Yeah, I would say it's not that they're recognizing that there are Torahitic mamzerim in the world and we're going to ignore it. I think they're asserting the right to impute to themselves the authority to say, we name existential truth, not the Torah. And yes, the Torah would say this, but we now are the Torah. Or yesterday the Torah would have said that. But there is no more Torah in that sense anymore. We are now Torah. And in the eyes of us, who is the real Torah, this woman is no longer married to her first husband. Therefore, that second marriage is a marriage, and the children are not mamzerim. So I think they are saying the existential reality of the status is as we say, not as the Torah says. But I agree that there's this ambiguity in their language, because what the Stam is lifting up is this: do you mean to tell me that you are going to marry someone who in the eyes of the Torah is already married? Yes. The fact that they say yes does suggest what you're saying, which is, yes, that woman is a married woman still, and we're still good. I don't know. It's twisting my brain.
Well, it's interesting that, so we'll look at the text. I mean, I'll actually, we can see this on the in the translation, because Steinsaltz, he often, who's doing the translation here, right? He has an interest in softening some of the more radical elements of the text, whether that's in his explanations, which is what we see in the non-bold, right? The bold is the actual words, more or less, of the text, and the non-bold is kind of some explanations. And sometimes things get bolded that shouldn't be bolded, which I have an eye for since I used to do some line editing. But in the text here, we see that the comma after yes is bold. Actually, it shouldn't be bold because none of the punctuation is actually in the original text. And there's a question about where is the right way to read it. Is there a matter whereby the Torah, it's not a bill of divorce, but due to virtuous women and licentious women, we permit a married woman to others? Yes, period.
Exactly.
That's how you and I read it. Steinsaltz says, yes, comma, and then kind of a little explanation, and yes, because, and yes, anyone, and then the next line is yes, comma, and the next line is anyone who betroths upon the agreement of the sages. That's the next line. Now, you could say, yes, comma, that it's a little softer than yes, period, right? And then like, okay, now we'll give you a little bit of explanation. But the bottom line is that, do you mean to tell me? And the answer is yeah, yep.
Yeah, exactly. And you're absolutely right that there's a world of messaging in that comma. Because as I pointed out last week, in the Yerushalmi, in the Jerusalem Talmud, there's a period there. And what comes after in our text in the Babylonian Talmud does not appear over there. And what appears over there is a kind of postscript that makes it very clear really what's implied in that yes. And it says over there, yes, the rabbis have the power to overturn Torah, period, full stop. And I think it's in that acknowledgement that they're overturning Torah that it's a little bit more of what I was saying earlier. It's not that they're saying, yeah, this woman is an adulteress and we don't care. It's that they're saying, we don't see as any longer valid what the Torah says about her. I think that's what they're saying. Now, having said that, I just want to say that the comma that Steinsaltz is putting in there is really very sensitive to what does come now in the Babylonian Talmud that we're reading. And in fact, this next line has a way of undermining the radicalness of that yes. And what I've learned over the years from my teachers who are academics is that it is characteristic of the Babylonian Talmud to backpedal some of the radicalness, whereas the Yerushalmi doesn't, which is interesting. So we'll look today at the backpedal that comes up right now. And sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, I think that's what. No, I don't think I don't remember.
Okay.
So the next thing that the rabbis say is, whether it's after a comma or after a period, anyone who betroths a woman. I mean, they're saying, because really the Talmud is aimed at men, and as we always say in a heteronormative context. But so anyone means any man.
Let's remember, it's not just that the audience is men. It's that only a man in their world can effectuate a marriage to, right, in their world, a woman. A woman cannot make a marriage happen. Okay, fine. So any man who betroths,
any man who betroths a woman betroths her contingent upon the agreement of the sages.
Great. Let's stop there for a minute.
Okay.
So first of all, that's a very bold statement, because the rabbis have inserted themselves into this dynamic between a man and, in their heteronormative world, a woman, and between his right to do what the Torah gives him the right to do, by saying, yeah, you can marry, the Torah gives you the right to effectuate marriage, but we're going to put ourselves in the middle and say that marriage can only ever be effectuated if it has our approval, if it corresponds to and is in line with the values that we've put in place in our new rabbinic system, which is a really chutzpahdik thing to do. And as Rashi points out here, Rashi says, oh yeah, that's what is meant by that formula that, quote unquote, traditionally the man says to the woman under the chuppah, which is, right, behold, I betroth you to me, harei at mikudeshet li, with this ring, the taba'at zo, and then the last three words, Kedat Moshe v'Yisrael, which is typically translated as according to the laws of Moses and Israel. The simple plain meaning of that formula always was according to the laws of, bracket, Moses and Israel as a kind of collective, the laws of the Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
But the rabbis, in order to kind of backfill some textual evidence for their right to say, oh, but only if I like this marriage, they read those words according to the laws of Moses and Israel to mean according to the laws of A, Moses, and the laws of B, Israel. There are two sets of laws, they're saying, which is very creative and, forced read of the phrase according to the laws of Moses and Israel. And they say the laws of Moses, yeah, that's the Torah, for sure. Laws of Israel, that's us, buddy. We're Israel. So if your marriage doesn't conform to our new set of rules, values, and principles, we have the right to retroactively to either deny you the right to marry or to retroactively annul this marriage. And this process is called hafka'at kiddushin, the uprooting of a marriage, the breaking of a marriage, and it comes right from the language that's about to appear. Yeah, go ahead.
Before that, I just want to hold up a contrast because, and I do this guardedly because I'm not an expert in Catholic canon law by any stretch of the imagination. But I did, I do have Catholic friends. No, I mean, I did used to teach at a Catholic law school, and at this Catholic law school that I taught at, some of my colleagues, and one in particular, was an expert in Catholic canon law, and so he was a Catholic canon lawyer. That was he would. I don't know exactly how it works, but he would bring cases within the church. And we had some really interesting conversations. And my understanding of how the Catholic tradition understands marriage is that the analogous thing of kiddushin, when you get married in a Catholic marriage, a bond is created between the husband and the wife that is a kind of a spiritual bond. It's actually something that's created. It's real. It's a new thing that's created in the world, and it's unbreakable. So it's as if if you think about Siamese twins being separated, the bond of marriage is the opposite of that. It's that the husband and wife become conjoined twins. I think it's the proper thing to say, not Siamese, but that they become conjoined twins so that they actually can't be broken apart. So then the issue is, well, what do you do? So that's why they don't have divorce in Catholicism. So now under certain circumstances, if you want to not be together anymore. I mean, it used to be in the old days, they were tough luck. There's nothing you can do. You don't have to live together, but you're not going to be able to marry someone else because we just don't recognize divorce. Not because we don't want to, not because we don't think it's a good thing, but because we actually think we can't do it. I mean, by the way, there's a lot of that can't language that we've been talking about, and our hands are tied. What are we going to do? But in their mind, it's look, I mean, God made a spiritual bond. We can't break it. We just can't, as much as we would try. It'd be if you were trying to cut something, cut a diamond, it can't be cut. It can only be cut, right? It can't be done. So the question is, so then they said, well, but wait a second, but the way that we could do it is if we could figure out that the marriage never happened in the first place, right? So we were under the illusion, we thought there was this bond that was created, but it actually never created because of some mistake. And then they start getting into well, what are all the kinds of mistakes that might mean that the marriage actually never happened in the first place? And that's actually very similar to contract law in any kind of legal system. Is that if there's some kind of mistake, you told me or I thought that I was buying hay that was fresh, but it turned out that it was from last year. That was a mistake, and so maybe I can undo the contract by saying that it never actually occurred because I was under the impression that I was buying something different, something like that. And over time, if you expand the category of the mistakes that are kind of allowed to be used to say that this never happened, then you can start to get something closer to divorce, right? So one of the examples that we were talking about was that, let's say that your husband had an affair. Then you could say that in the old way, you would have said, well, what can I do? You have this ironclad bond and we can't break it. But in this newer approach that my colleague had been developing or promoting, and I think successfully. I think this has become an accepted thing in Catholicism, that that you could say I think it was called something like mistake as to the quality of the person. So meaning I thought I was marrying somebody who was faithful and somebody who would never have had an affair, and the fact that he had an affair is proof of the mistake. So that means that the fact that he had an affair is proof that I thought I was marrying a different person. So I actually never married him. So that bond was never formed. And then now we don't have to dissolve it. It was never formed. So now we can basically, like you say, hafka'at kiddushin, we can essentially annul the marriage. The marriage never happened.
That's
and
genius.
The difference between that and I think that what we're talking about is that in the Talmud, the rabbis are more willing to say more explicitly, maybe the same thing actually happening. In both cases, there's a pre-existing, in one case it's the Torah, and in another case it's God in Catholicism, but there's this idea that previously we would have said our hands are tied, there's nothing we can do. In one case, we're doing that with a big wink, in a sense, like the Catholic approach is saying, like, we understand that 200 years ago they would have said, sorry, Charlie, you're married, but we can kind of backfill that whole thing. Whereas in the Talmud, they're being more upfront about it.
Yeah, that's true. And let's remember that, I'll tell you what, let's go back to the text and get this last line out, the half of this line out on the table, and then we'll unpack it a little more. So how does Steinsaltz translate it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so anyone who betroths a woman betroths her contingent upon the agreement of the sages, and in certain cases, such as those mentioned above, the sages invalidated his betrothal retroactively.
Okay, so what that's saying is, since the rabbis inserted themselves into the permissioning of any marriage, if they deem that the continuation of any marriage violates their sort of moral sensibility or any of the rules they've set up to change the moral landscape, they have the right to say this marriage no longer is continuing with our consent, and had we known you were going to behave in this way, we never would have married you in the first place. Therefore, we are pulling our permission and retroactively annulling this marriage, and it's as if it never happened in the first place. So this process is called hafka'at kiddushin. It's the right of a beit din, a court of three rabbis, sages, to annul a marriage, even against the will of the husband. A husband who, in this halachic framework, is the only one who can choose to end the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Even if he refuses, the marriage can be pulled out from under him. Okay. And so, for example, if a husband is abusive to his wife, and he still and he doesn't want to divorce her, he just wants to abuse her and stay in the marriage, the Beit Din can say, if we had known that you were going to behave this way, we never would have let you marry her in the first place, and we are going to mafkia, we're going to do hafka'at kiddushin, we're going to uproot this marriage. And this happens today in, interestingly, liberal halachic settings, for example, in the conservative movement. What's notable and outrageous, and is only now beginning in the last decade or so to come into conversation, is in the Orthodox world, where the aguna problem is a problem. It's a problem only because this mechanism that we've had for 2,000 years, it's right here in black and white, is no longer being used. And it's only since women have been learning Talmud that women have gone, wait a minute.
Right.
Page 3 of Ketubot, there's Hafkat. This is the solution. We've had it all along. Do you mean to tell me we've had this solution all along and you've chosen not to use it? And the only answer the Rabbanut or Orthodox authorities can give is, mean,
Uh-huh.
you're right. It's here and we haven't used it. Now the conversation is a different conversation.
And just to clarify, what you're talking about is the case where a husband refuses. This is a different case where a husband refuses to give his wife a divorce and leaves her as an aguna, meaning somebody who's chained, stuck with her husband and can't remarry. This is this problem that's alive today in the Orthodox world, that there's a lot of feeling like this is a terrible situation, that there are these husbands who are able to use this power in the divorce, basically, right? I mean, because like you say, like, look, you don't think I should, you want me to pay childcare? Look, let's make a deal. I don't have to pay childcare, and then I'll give you a Jewish divorce. But if you take me to the regular court and say I'm going to have to pay childcare, then I'm going to withhold my Jewish divorce. So you might be able to get child support from me, but you'll never be able to marry again. And, you can use that as kind of a cudgel in the secular divorce proceedings, or for whatever other reason that somebody might do. And a lot of Orthodox or religious authorities say, yeah, that's terrible, but what can I do?
Our hands are tied.
Our hands are tied. The husband in Jewish law has the right to give a divorce, and the wife doesn't.
And the right to refuse to give a divorce.
And refuse to give a divorce. And right here, we're seeing right here that there is this concept that you would think that the court could say, well, okay, then we're just going to annul the marriage and take away the husband's power in that sense. And the, like you say, the tool is there. You have a sense of why there's been why hasn't that tool been used before? In other words, like why here we're seeing a case where Rava is concerned about the well-being of the woman. Why was that not used for this issue of well-being of the woman?
The patriarchy?
But I mean, no, but I mean, like, is there a reason why in certain cases it has been and in certain cases it hasn't been? Like,
in Orthodoxy, as far as I know, this entire tool is, it's put into that excuse of, well, they could do it because they were closer to Moses and Mount Sinai, but it's not for us to do, which I think is just kind of laughable. I mean, I think what's going on, it's not that they selectively use it; they don't use it at all.
Uh-huh.
Or else there would be no aguna problem.
Right.
There would be a problem of the locus of the problem would be on the individuals in a Beit Din choosing or not choosing to use this tool. But the tool is not recognized as a valid tool, as far as I understand it, anywhere in Orthodox communities. And why is that? I can only surmise that it's men protecting men and being uncharacteristically, unravaitically sensitive to the suffering of women. I mean, this entire sugya is an example of injustification for utilizing this tool for the problem of agunot. And I would say it's an abdication of their use of of their responsibility to use the tradition in the way it was meant. But you'd have to ask someone from that community to justify it.
It's interesting because in Catholicism, it's a little bit different, because in Catholicism, nobody can initiate a divorce. It's not neither the man nor the woman, right? And so one of the objections to some of this like greater use of annulment has actually come from women. There was a famous case with one of the Kennedys, and the wife basically said that the husband was using this annulment to get out of the marriage, and was making it so that now you're saying that for the last 20 years of my life I haven't been married? I mean, like, that you're saying to me that I was never married, and you're saying to our children that they were born out of wedlock? That there was some objection because it was actually harming the woman, or the woman was feeling harmed by it. Here it's different, because in the Jewish case, the you could say, well, we don't ever do this for a man because the man has the option to divorce. This would be a tool that could only be used by women and only in the circumstance where the man is misbehaving, or whatever it might be. It seems like some of those objections that we might know about from the Catholic conversation actually don't apply in the Jewish conversation.
And another aspect that is different in the two contexts is that the annulment of a Jewish marriage does not change the status of the children born in that marriage. The fact that the marriage, quote unquote, never happened, if it is annulled, the children born from that non-marriage do not take on the status of mamzerim, because their parents were permitted to have intercourse and produce a child, whether within wedlock, within a marriage, or without. And there's no halachic disability to a child being born of two people permitted to one another who don't marry. So it doesn't change the status of Jewish children to have a Jewish marriage annulled.
Is there, like, it feels to me like, I just want to make sure before we move on, I just want to make sure that I fully have this whole marriage thing right, because it feels like, are the rabbis basically saying here that there is no way to be married, no matter what you might think the Torah says, or maybe it used to say it, in other words, maybe it used to be that there were other ways to get married, but now there aren't. What they're saying is that there's actually no way to get married properly, officially, Jewishly, other than by using the rabbinic toolbox, which includes a ketubah and whatever other steps. And so, whereas you might have said, according to the Torah, it looks like you can get married through the act of intercourse itself, for example, that we don't have that anymore. That's not going to be a valid marriage anymore. And the only way to get married is through the particular rabbinic approach. And by the way, I want to also note, I think this is right, just to clarify, that it's not because it's not that you need to have a rabbi perform your marriage. It's that you have to execute your marriage through the rabbinically ordained formula, but it doesn't have to be done by a rabbi. There's always a lot of confusion about that in among Jews, that they're surprised to hear that a rabbi doesn't have to perform a marriage. No, but it does have to be performed according to the rabbinic rules.
That's right. Exactly. There's no sort of ministerial magic that a rabbi, throws on. There's no because I bless this, or there's nothing like that. No, there's actually nothing, zero, that a rabbi can effectuate that a knowledgeable layperson can't, and actually an ignorant person can't. It's just that the knowledgeable piece ensures, like you said, that whatever procedure is done is according to the rules, because a knowledgeable person would know, what rules or what documents need to happen and so on. But we also haven't really connected the dots yet. So I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but let's eventually get to, how does this tool of Hafkat Kiddushin, what does that have to do with this case?
Yeah, I mean, let's go there, because I think that is where my head is turning, and I'm just kind of wanting to make sure that we iron everything out. So if I understand this correctly, they're saying, look, you were so surprised a second ago when you said, what, you're going to take a married woman and you're going to allow her to marry another woman, even though she's still married to the first person, and we said, yeah, we're going to do that. But the explanation is that the reason why it's not quite how you just said it in such a shocked manner, is that the only reason that a woman is ever a married woman is because she's been married within the rabbinic framework. And here we're telling you that we are adjusting the laws of the rabbinic framework such that we can effectively annul the marriage, or by saying that a divorce is going to take is going to be in force if the condition was met, whether or not there was any onus.
Not exactly. Not
Okay.
exactly. And this is slippery. And every time I learn this, I have to rewrap my head around it. And it never quite works for me because it's a contradiction to the yes. What I think the rabbis are saying here is, if a man gives his wife a conditional get, conditional divorce document, behold, this is your divorce. You will be divorced from me if I do not return within 30 days, let's say. He goes off on his trip. And remember, he doesn't want to divorce her. He just doesn't want her to be stuck as a married woman to him in the event that he dies without witnesses and nobody can find his body. Okay. He goes away. He's chased up a tree by a bear, and he doesn't get down from the tree until day 31. And then he comes back and he finally gets home on day 31 and he says, oh, that divorce, we've been divorced now for 24 hours. That should be ripped up because it only went into effect because of onus, because I was constrained from returning by those bears. The Torah gives me the right to have that condition be seen as not reached, and therefore the divorce not go into effect. And I'm going to play that Torah card. And Onsa Rachmana Patre, God forgives those who are constrained and undoes all negative consequences of that constraint. I have that card. I was born with it as a Jew, or as I converted. I'm spiritually the inheritor of that card. I'm playing it. What this line here is saying is, you have the right to play it, but I have the right to say, if you're going to be such a jerk as to play that card, and it would be jerky of you to do that, because if any woman knows that her husband can come home and play that card, she's going to be uncertain whether the get she has in her hand is really going to be a get forever or one that's going to be overturned. If you're going to be such a jerk as to continue to play that card, and we can't actually stop you. This is where the backing up of the radical is. We can't actually stop you, and no, we can't actually marry her again. In other words, perform her marriage to a second husband. What we're going to do to you is we're going to uproot your marriage retroactively. We're going to do Hafkat Kiddushin in such a case. Now, you've got no card to play because you've got no marriage to play it on. You are not married. She never was married to you. That's a mechanism that they're going to use if a man insists on doing what the Torah actually allows him to do. So in the end, you don't have as radical a move as you had with the yes, because that radical move was, yeah, we know what the Torah thinks. We know that the Torah knows the man played his get out of jail free card and they are married again. And yet we're going to perform this marriage and we're going to say F you to the Torah. What we say goes. It really isn't that bold of a move that we're making. But again, this is a later addition only to the Babylonian Talmud, and I think is an apologetic trying to tone down.
Because I'm not totally convinced, because if I'm not that I'm saying I'm not convinced that that's what they're trying to say here, but like it feels like a little bit logically problematic to me, because if what I understand you to be talking about is like, okay, so you have right. So I gave this conditional divorce to say if I don't come back within 30 days, the divorce is final. Turns out I was chased up a tree. So I now come back. It's a little bit of Schrodinger's cat kind of thing, right? The idea is like, is the cat alive or dead? Right? It's in a box. We don't know, right? Now, so in a sense, he says like, well, I have the right to say that this divorce isn't final because I had onus. I was chased up a tree. I was, I couldn't. It wasn't my fault that I didn't come back. But I also could just say nothing, and then sort of allow the divorce to play out, like to be final, right? The thing is that unless there's a kind of statute of limitations, then I maintain myself in that Schrodinger's cat situation indefinitely, right? I could always come back and say, well, 2 years later, it turned, yeah, I didn't come back within 30 days, but that was because I was chased up a tree. And so now, meanwhile, the wife has married another man. So now we're still in this like Schrodinger's cat situation. She may be an adulteress and she may not be. And it depends on actually two factors at this point. Number one, whether the husband was chased up a tree or not, which we don't know. He's the only one who knows, right? And the other possibility is he going to speak up or not? Is he going to enforce it or not?
That's right.
Her being an adulteress is not actually, the fact that whether or not she is an adulteress is a fact in the world. It's just in a box, right? We don't know what the fact is until we look inside it. So the thing about the Hafka'at Kiddushin, the idea of the annulment, if the basic idea is saying, but well, husband, if you try to enforce your claim that she's an adulteress, based on that you experienced onus, then we're going to pull the rug out from under you and say that we're going to undo the marriage and the marriage never was, and therefore she's not an adulteress. But meanwhile, all that time until you decided whether or not you want to come and enforce your right, she technically may have actually been an adulteress. So like it feels to me like if you take that all seriously, like the only answer that really makes sense, because the only answer that actually says to her on day 30, you're no longer an adulteress, is one that says we are going to it's less about the annulment. It's more about saying we are redefining marriage to be rabbinic marriage only, and what the rabbis giveth, the rabbis taketh away. And so and within that system, we are now going to say, if you give a conditional divorce and that condition is met, it doesn't matter whether or not there's onus. Like that's the only way that it makes her not actually committing adultery for sure. And so that's why this piece here at the end feels like it really is very well, the part about the hafka'ah feels to me like it's the apologetic tack on, but it's not really what's going on.
That's really interesting. And I think you may have named one of the pieces that still has bothered me about this mechanism, is that it doesn't really solve the problem. The problem of her actually being an adulteress, even though, she's in Schrodinger's box and we don't know that that's the case. I think that's right. But what has more bothered me about this is that
it's a workaround which backs the rabbis up from their more powerful move of saying that which looks to the Torah as adulterous, in which the Torah would name as adulterous, we are going to say is not, period. I think that's a cleaner, bolder move. And I think you're right that this mechanism both softens and yet doesn't solve completely the problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very Talmudic, like what I want to do at this stage, right? Like where it is like what I want to like add another page to the Talmud here, where, because there's so much in the Talmud where it's like, right, they want to really get it right. They kind of want to, there's like, yeah, but if we say what you're saying, then the logical implication is this, and then and that's I like it. It can sometimes go too far, but what feels weird about this in a way is it's like it almost kind of like stops and doesn't give you the next the next logical argument, which is basically, but wait a second, but if it's really a question of this is that we're only telling the man, like, if you enforce your rights, we're going to take your right away from you. It's not really solving the problem for the woman. It's just saying to her, like, okay, you're committing adultery, but we're not going to enforce it, which actually makes the children mamzerim. So it feels like it's not, unless the conclusion somehow ends up that she is not committing adultery, period, end of story, then I don't think it's a satisfactory resolution.
Okay, so I'm going to have to walk myself through this mechanism to locate again the problem that you're identifying. Okay, let me see if I have it. Husband gives his wife a conditional get. Behold, here's your get. If I do not return within 30 days. Goes away, chased up a tree, comes back on day 31.
Let's say he comes back on day 35.
Yeah, let's say he comes back on day 35, and on day 31, she got remarried because she had what she thought was a kosher get in her hand. Does she know Rava's new law of Einonis Begitin? Is she in a world of Einonis Begitin? Yes.
Let's say that she is.
Okay, fine. She knows she's in a world of Einonis Begitin, so she knows her husband can't. That's what's no.
No, she knows what she knows according to this last line, I think, is that if her husband comes back and tries to undo the get, the rabbis will come along and annul the marriage.
Okay, so I think what this last line does is it says that we're still in a world of Einonis Begitin, but the way in which, the mechanism through which we are depriving this man of being able to claim onus to undo the get is through this mechanism. Okay, let me hold on to that. So she goes and remarries on day 35. He comes back and says, hey, but I was chased up a tree. Okay, hold it. Hey, but I was chased up a tree. Before the Beit Din meets, and this is your Schrodinger's cat box, before the Beit Din meets, are you saying... See, I think the moment he comes back and tries to play his onus card is a kind of instantaneous retroactive annulment that goes into motion.
Right, but like what I'm saying, like I think fundamentally that's right, but like what I'm trying to like figure out exactly is like, so he comes back ultimately on day 35. She gets remarried on day 31. I feel like from day 32, days 32, 33, and 34, she is committing adultery according to the Torah. And the question is, so the only solution that truly makes everything right is one that says that the marriage ended on day 30. And then she's fine. But if what we're saying is the marriage actually ends on day 35.
Okay, wait a minute. All right, sorry. When the marriage is annulled retroactively, the presumptive adultery is no longer adultery because there never, quote unquote, never was a marriage. That's it. So we don't really have a problem.
Here's my question. If
it's only presumptive adultery.
But let's say that he comes back on day 35 and he sees that she's married to another man.
Yes.
He says in his mind, I'm not going to insist on my rights under onus to undo this divorce because I see she's happy. I see she's married to another man. But he continues to have
You're
the
right.
right to do that.
You're right. No, you're right. That actually, the more problematic case is when he doesn't insist.
Right.
Because regardless of his insistence or not, a condition that goes into effect by virtue of onus hasn't effectively gone into effect.
Right.
Whether he wants it to or not, or is willing to take or wants to take advantage of that fact. Yeah, you're right. So because the condition went into effect as the result of onus, the condition isn't moel. It's not fulfilled. Therefore, the get doesn't go into effect. You're right. You're right. That's a problem.
So that's why, like, I don't know if this is like what's meant or whatever. Like the resolution that I would prefer would be one that would say some version of, because we have the right to, because we have the right to, because this whole marriage is happening within this new system that we've constructed, and within that system we actually have the right to undo the marriage as if it never happened. Then all the more so do we have the right to do something that's even less dramatic than that, which is to remove onus as a category for enforcing divorces, right? We're just going, right? Then basically, because we have the right, and by the way, this would go even further in terms of the issue of agunot in modern Judaism, is to say, because this whole system is happening within the system that we built, then there is no, our hands are tied. Then we can do anything that we want to.
That's right.
And we want to have certainty. We want to not have, adultery where that's not actually what's going on. We want to not have suffering. We want to minimize the number of mamzerim. Like, we want to do all these things. And therefore we can modify the rules and regulations to be different from what it would have been under the Torah system in order to effectuate those things. Now, I think the issue that's happening today in Orthodoxy, may be this issue that we've talked about of Yeridat HaDorot, that each generation is less close to God, less wise than the previous one. And they're saying, look, that was the way, like, if we could admit that they set up the system that way, that the marriage and divorces we have it today, it has nothing to do with the Torah. It's simply a rabbinic system. But for whatever reason, the rabbis, Rava did do this Einonis Begitin. He did make divorces more certain, but he didn't. We look in the Talmud and we see that there's certain other kinds of things that you can do for a man who doesn't give his wife a divorce, for example. And this has caused all kinds of issues more recently with all kinds of crimes, but that you can beat up the man until he says, I want to divorce her. It doesn't have to be fully what's the word? Like when you want to do something, volitional. Yeah, you can be. It can just say, he can just state, I want to, even if he doesn't really want to.
And
so you can't beat him up until he says that. For example. But they didn't say somewhere here like we can annul the marriage because the husband won't get. So look, they didn't do it. What can we do? Our hands are tied. So when we do this show, there are two possibilities I think that flow from the approach that we take on this show, right? One is to say, hey, Orthodox rabbis, you have other options. You could actually do it. And number two, and for me, the more primary one, that whole system is crashing. We're actually talking about building a new system, and we would definitely make sure that in our new system, it didn't have these problems.
One easy way to do that would simply be to allow women to initiate divorces.
Exactly. Right. So, by the way, let's really put our thumb on that one. In this version of Judaism, the rabbinic version of Judaism, women don't have the right to initiate divorces, period. There's nothing that you can do. That is inherently horrible, like meaning like it's probably, it was always horrible. But I mean, the way that we look at it now from our perspective, it's, we don't want, it's not that you want to like try to like tweak that system so that some of that is softened. You want to say like, that is absurd. We cannot live under a system in which women cannot initiate divorces. If that means that only that in and of itself is the evidence that we need to build a new system altogether, then so be it. And that, right in that, and there's certainly other examples, but that's certainly one of them. It's like, how can we live in a system where women can't initiate a divorce?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we simply need to get those people who have that sensibility and sensitivity to the obvious moral concern of women as human, full human beings, to sit on the law committee and say yes. I'm actually not sure of the status of conservative halakha on the issue of women initiating divorces.
I'm not sure either, but that's why I'm saying. It would surprise me if a woman can initiate a divorce in conservative Judaism, because I think conservative Judaism tries to make extreme modifications wherever it can and feels the need to, but they tend to be in the form of, we're going to find a way kind of around this rather than we're going to just change it.
Yeah. Which is a dynamic we see right here. And that's why this last piece of this text disappoints me. Because you're right, it shifts the mindset from Rava's mindset of we can do anything.
Yep. To
our hands are tied, we really can't do anything. We can do certain workarounds, but the damage of the workarounds is that it restores that myth of our hands are tied.
Well, exactly. Look,
in some theoretical place.
Right. When I used to teach, when I used to teach law, it's like civil rights law, there was a case. This had to do with like healthcare reform. Maybe this was, I don't remember what class it was that I taught disability law. I don't remember what it was, but I would teach this class about there was all this like energy behind healthcare reform, in the 1990s, and the big story, the big thing that was being used to say why we need to have healthcare reform was what was called drive-through deliveries. It was the idea that you go in to have a baby, and they say like, you don't really need to be in the hospital after you have a baby. I mean, it's like, so you could just go right home in a few hours, and you go right home. And most people have an instinct like, let the person be in the hospital for a day or two. I mean, come on, this is horrible. Like if you're doing, so there was a lot of energy saying, oh my God, there's drive-through deliveries. Of course we need healthcare reform. So one way to deal with that is to say, yeah, we need healthcare reform. Let's completely reform the whole system of healthcare in this country. The other way to handle that is to say, oh, let's make a little law saying you can't have drive-through deliveries anymore. You have to have 1 or 2 days in the hospital after a delivery. And that is what they did. And that takes the wind out of the sails of the whole healthcare reform movement. So in a sense here, solving this problem in an unsatisfactory way not only may not fully solve the problem, but it also takes away the energy from saying, wait a second, do you mean to tell me that a woman can't initiate a divorce? Because I'll tell you, that's how most of my friends would read this text. Like they wouldn't say, do you mean to tell me that a man could be the, they say, do you mean to tell me that in Judaism a woman can't initiate a divorce? Like, and I would be like, yes. and they would say, well, that's not right. And I would say, I agree with you. So that's why I think that that this is beyond putting a woman on the law committee. That this is because I think that that at a certain point it may not look. I mean, there are women on the law committee of the conservative movement, and I think that the law committee, even with women on it, will say our hands are tied. We can do workarounds, but we can't upend the entire. So sometimes what I'm getting at is like sometimes there's evidence. And I think that as we go on, we want to say, like, what is that evidence in our world today that it goes beyond getting a woman or an LGBT person or whatever on the law committee. That's great. We should have that. But that's a stopgap measure. And what we really are seeing here, what you say, is a crash. And the rebuilding after the crash is not to just make up stuff out of scratch. It's to say, no, like it fell apart. Now we have a pile of stuff. Let's now sift through the pile and take the stuff that's still good, and we're going to rebuild something new. So it's still going to be Jewish, but it's going to include women can initiate divorces.
Right. And the unwillingness to return to the era of radical audacity is on the one hand hard to understand. On the other hand, of course I understand it.
Yeah.
When things are crashing, it is not a natural response to say, let's not make too many changes because that's going to accelerate our demise.
Yeah.
And the more we can, try to keep things quote unquote traditional, the more that will act as a bulwark toward change. It actually does the opposite. And, that wasn't the rabbinic approach, but that I think that's the mindset, which is it's really unfortunate. And we can't forget, and I don't want people to think that the Talmud is kind of a historically flat document and that it ends in this disappointing way. This last piece is an addition, a far later addition to the Talmud, somewhere between 300 and 400 years after Rava's very radical move, and after the radicalness of the Stama himself to say, yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. Disregard what the Torah thinks about this woman. Yes, that's exactly what we're going to do. What I can't understand is, why does the Stama, maybe it's like the Stama's grandson, like grandson Stama, I don't know. But the Stama, this is a Stamatic edition as well, to backpedal that edition. And I'm not sure why it's there.
Well, that's a good place for us. I think that this will keep coming up as we do, because I think the answer is, whoa, we just unleashed something very scary, very powerful here, and if it's like you say, why isn't Svara taught the way it is? The concept of Svara, that's very dangerous. It's I like it, but it's very dangerous to those who are looking for that kind of stability.
Yeah, I think there were two different Stamas here. I think there was the Stama, and then I think there was like Flunky Stama who who came in, a generation later and said, "Oh, wait a minute."
Yep.
Anyway.
Yep. All right. Well, to be continued.
All right. Thanks, Dan. That was fun.
Thanks, Vinay. Bye.
Bye.